I went out to my shed and I picked out a couple of pieces of hardwood. This is maple from a pallet, actually. And I have no idea how long I've had this or where exactly I got it from. All I know is I've had it for a long time and it's really well seasoned. And what I want to do with it is I want to make a prototype bar clamp, very similar to my other clamps over there in the corner, except those are made with 2x4s, you know, regular pine 2x4, and they're not as convenient to use as I would like. So I've got a different idea for this one and I want to try it out. So the first thing I need to do is cut it down to size. I'm looking at this, it looks pretty good along this edge. It's nice and clear. Over here it's really rough looking, so it's got a few nail holes in it, but I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. That first cut brought it down to 2 1/4 inches wide. Now I'm going to move my fence again and make another cut, and that'll cut off this rough edge over on the other side. I'll tell you, this is not the very best stuff to work with. This is really crooked, but it doesn't have to be since this is just a prototype. I could go the extra step here and flatten one side and run it through the planer, but I don't think I'm going to bother. The other stuff over here, I've got enough good stuff in here to make the other parts for it, which are not many. I just need a piece for the end, the fixed jaw, you could say, and then the parts that make up the moving jaw, and I can easily get it from this stuff over here. The next thing I need to do with this part, though, which is the bar, is I need to cut a series of notches in the bottom, spaced out about 1 inch apart. Now these notches are just 1/8 of an inch deep. So what I've done on my big table saw sled is I've added the pin for these to space out on. I'll make the first cut and then I'll add the pin, and then that pin will index the next cuts. Okay, that wasn't difficult to do, a little bit tedious though. But the benefit is, if you're making 6 of these clamps at the same time, which would probably be a good idea, you could gang them all together and cut them all at the same time. You know, stack 6 together, tape them together, and that way you wouldn't have to do this 6 times in a row. Save some time. So what's the idea behind these notches on the bottom of the bar, John? Well, it is meant to be the same as this clamp design right here. The way this one works is it has the notches on the back side and the thing locks into it so that when you push on it, it doesn't have any breaks in this side of the bar. And that's important. That stops it from breaking. That's a problem, big problem I have with my red clamps. They would crack if the grain was not completely straight all the way through because the notches were on this side up here. So I'm going to be doing a very similar thing with this clamp here. The only differences are that the part that fits in here is going to be a piece of steel that will move up and down. What I need to do now is I need to trim a little bit off of this on both sides to make it narrower so that the moving jaw will fit through it properly and won't get hung up on the sides. It won't be too tight. I already drew this up in SketchUp, and the height for my fixed jaw, and actually the moving jaw as well, because they have to match, is 3 inches. And I think that matches what I have over there. I haven't checked. But part of this process is to do it and actually see if that's the best size. And I think that 3 inches is actually too high, because what you have here is you have to have space up at the top here for the handle, and you have to have room underneath the handle for your hand to move. So when I measure that here, I see that 2.5 inches would be fine. So I'm going to change the 3 inches to 2.5. It might sound like an insignificant thing, but believe me, it's not. So I've got my piece here that I already cut to the same thickness as this so that they can be joined together, and I'll just cut it down to 2.5 inches long after trimming the end straight and square. I also need one that's 1 inch long, and because I got so much, tear out on the back of this one, there's a piece missing. Not that that's a big deal. I put my zero clearance insert in my fence here, and I'll make this cut. I got wrapped up in other things, so I had to put the project on hold for a couple of days. Also, I was annoyed that my light was out down there, so I fixed that. I also did a couple of other things with the clamp in the meantime. Not major stuff. It was to put the end on here, and this is pretty basic. It's very similar to the way I've done other clamps in the past, and that's just, there's a solid wood block, top and bottom, and then plywood that fits on the side here that's glued and then pinned in place to keep it from moving while you clamp it up. And that is the fixed jaw on the end. I also had time to think about the design, and I'm not liking the idea of the steel plate that locks in the notches moving back and forth. I can think of a way to spring load it so it kind of does it automatically, but it's too complex, and I don't really think it's needed. So I'm going to go back to my original concept here, which is like this right here, and this slides ahead by tipping it forwards, and then when you get it in a notch, it locks in place. And the only difference is, of course, that it won't be wood locking in the notch, it'll be a piece of flat steel. So to that end, I need to work on what's known as the moving jaw now. And I'm going to start with the plywood. This is kind of out of sequence, but I have the plywood in front of me right now. And I already have the saw set to the width that I need, so I'll cut that to length, and that's 5 5/8. All right, so that's 2 more of those, and they match exactly the ones I used on the fixed jaw. And the next thing that I need to do is cut the solid wood parts of the moving jaw, and that's just more of the maple that I cut the bar from. Except this time I'm going to leave the full thickness and just sand the surface smooth. All right, when I compare it to the bar, it's almost a full 1/16 of an inch thicker, and I think that's best. What I've done in the past is make these things too tight, I think. This one here is not that bad, but the red ones that I made first, they're not my first homemade clamp, of course, but they're the one that I've, was documented on the website or whatever. And those are really tight. I've had to sand those down. I think more space is better. It makes it faster to adjust, and it really doesn't have any effect on the operation of the clamp itself. So next I need to cut this to length, and I'll do that on the miter saw again. And then I need to drill it out for the T-nut that goes in there for the lead screw. I'll also have to drill a hole all the way through for the rod. I also have to make the pad that the lead screw goes into that presses up against the wood. It's the same as what's on the other one, the all wood one. I just got to drill a 3/4 inch hole in this block, and then a washer will fit inside there, and also it has to be deep enough for the nut that will go on the end of the threaded rod so that when you untighten the clamp, it'll pull back as well. Okay, I've got a few more of the parts done. However, I've been thinking about this particular part right here. This is the bottom of the, say, the moving jaw here. And this plate represents that part that fits up inside the notch in this one. And on this one here, it works great. And I can apply a lot of force up here without any problem. And it doesn't seem to be an issue at all. However, thinking about this, I can't see a way to connect this steel plate to this very insignificant wooden block here to make it strong enough to withstand any kind of backwards pulling action, because that's what you have here when you tighten the handle. Hang on, I'll get the real one. When you lock that in the notch down here and you tighten the handle, this pushes back up here, and this notch here pulls up like this, tighter into the notch. It also pulls back though. And that's the force that I'm concerned about with this here. I was originally thinking that just a screw through it into the block will hold it, but I'm starting to think that that's not the case. Obviously, I could put a bolt through, right through the block with a nut on the back here, and that would really hold it well. But I don't want to, do something that complex. I could also use a machine screw right through the whole thing and thread it into this part here, and that would be really strong. Except, once again, it's more complex than I wanted to do. I'm not one to give up on an idea, but I don't want to chase it down into a rabbit hole that leads me nowhere. And I think that that's where this is taking me. Another option that I considered was to cut a slot in the plywood, the 1/4-inch plywood that laps over the side here, so that that bar will go through the plywood and lock into that. And on the surface, that seems like a good idea, but 1/4-inch plywood is not that strong in that regard. You'd have to have quite a lot around it to make it strong enough to withstand that. And, by then, it's not as elegant as I would like. Also, it's the matter of cutting that slot in the piece of plywood evenly in both pieces so that it goes through. It's just not where I wanted to go with this. So I'm thinking about scrapping the project altogether as it is right now and starting something different. Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that happens when you do stuff like this. You get an idea, and then you do a rough drawing in SketchUp. And like I said before, SketchUp is not reality. Everything works in SketchUp. Everything looks okay in SketchUp until you get out here in the shop and start putting it together. So what I may do is I may take this fixed jaw off the end, flip it around so that the notches are up, and carry on working with the moving jaw so that the plate is actually at the back of that and it locks into the notches like so, like it normally would, like some other ones that I've done, and just, make the bottom part so that it has room to tilt up like this so that you can pull it back and forth. It's not what I wanted, but I can't think of a better way to make what I had in mind work. So I guess that'll be about it for this one. Sorry to disappoint anybody that was tuning in to see a brand new clamp being born, but like I said, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Okay, almost immediately after I ended that last clip, I decided to try something different here with this, and it's this right here. I just went ahead and did it all. I didn't film any of it because this is just a test to see just how strong this particular arrangement is here. I don't have a lot of faith in it, to be honest, but I figured it was worth a try. There is a clamp arrangement like this. It's actually a wooden bar type clamp. I think it's factory made though, and it uses a piece of wire actually that hooks down around and clips into notches in the bottom. So this is very similar to that. This is just pieces of quarter inch plywood glued onto the side of this block, and then I've got I think it's a number 10 screw going through. But you can see the way it adjusts. It'll slide back once you tip it like that, and then you can latch it into the notch and it's locked there. But we're going to find out right now how much force this can apply. And of course, when I say measuring force, I can only mean one thing, and that's the original test rig here for the homemade clamps. I still have it. One thing I'm going to have to do though is I'm going to have to put it on the front here so that it's actually pushing down on this area over here so it's closer to the dial indicator itself. If I do it from the back, I think I'll be too far away. You know what, I'm going to do it from the back anyway. The reading that I have here now is just the weight, pretty much the weight of the clamp pressing down on the wood. I haven't got it tightened in any way. So I'm going to start tightening it now and see how far it can go. So that's half. 1.5. 2, and holding. It's 2.5. Okay, that's more than 3 in holding. But the screw on the back here is actually bending. I'll bring the camera around to have a look at that. Okay, in the time it took me to take the camera around back and come again, it really hasn't drifted or eased up. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to try to keep going. This is very difficult to turn now, and see if I can't get any more out of it. I hear some cracking. That's 3.5, you could say. Man, that's too hard to turn. Holy smoke, that's 4. I'm amazed. I'm flabbergasted here. Let's see if I can go any further. My hands are getting really sore from trying to grip this handle. Maybe if I put a wrench on it or a pair of pliers. Okay, that's 420. .430 vice grips to turn this. 440, and that was a crack. .450, but it's just fading. .450. Oh, there it goes. Okay, it wasn't a spectacular failure. Like, it's still ticking here. What actually happened was the bolt is pulling through the, not pulling through the plywood, but it's bent around into almost a complete U shape, so it's pulling out of the plywood actually. I thought that the plywood would tear apart way before that bolt would break, or bend, I mean, but obviously that's not the case. So since this went up to, I think it was 3.5 before the bolt actually bent too much, I think that if I used a 1/4 inch shaft in there instead of a number 10 bolt, which is considerably thinner, that 1/4 inch, say, you know, cold rolled steel, you could say, just through plywood in the very same arrangement here, would be excellent for panel glue ups. It wouldn't have any problem, I don't think. Yeah. There it goes. It finally popped off. But you can see what happened to the bolt right here. It's completely bent around like that. So given what I've learned from this, I can't call this a complete failure. I wasn't able to make the clamp the way I wanted to originally, but you know what? Maybe I was a little bit too hasty. Given how strong this arrangement here, which is nowhere near as chunky as what I envisioned for the other one with the plate, obviously it'd be more difficult to bend this plate right here than it would be for a number 10 screw. So maybe I'll try it again. Maybe I'll actually take this part here and add that part to it the way I wanted to in the beginning, just to see how well it works. But I'm gonna have to save that one for another video.